So, Mr. von Schoenberg, you were in the panel about energy efficiency and renewable energy sources, and you spoke about some really success stories that have worked. Can you tell us the main points of what has worked?
Yes, well, first of all, it's great to be in Kosovo. It's my first visit, and I think you have a tremendous potential here. Although I don't know the country in detail, I can't really comment about your legal situation, etc. But just to give you a few ideas about the situation in Germany, I showed a slide with all the targets and where we are to achieve those. I think on reducing greenhouse gases, we've done quite a good job so far, reducing them by around about 27% versus 1990. There's still a long way to go, of course. We've also done a very good job on renewable energy with roughly 30% of generation capacity now renewable and 32.6% of consumption again renewable. That's mainly wind, solar, hydro and biomass, of course. The reason for the successes of that policy, I think, have been a very consistent long-term feed-in tariff policy, which has got us up to that high level. And we've, of course, been helped hugely by the massive decline in costs in solar, but also in wind over the last few years. There's been some very important side effects of the German energy transition, which I think would certainly be of interest here in the West Balkan countries. One, of course, is this huge area of employment. Energy efficiency and renewable energy together have created about 870,000 jobs in Germany. That is not just in manufacturing. Manufacturing is quite important, especially in the wind industry, but it's also in installation, and very important, it's local jobs in operations, in maintenance and in service of these plants. So you get a lot of local people, for example, maintaining these plants, electricians working together with the grid companies, local businesses. The figure was something like 190,000 businesses have been set up in Germany since the energy transition really started in about 2000. The other point, again, I think for rural communities, which is very important, because most renewable energy facilities are in rural areas. A wind power plant, it's always in a rural area. A biomass plant is nearly always in a rural area. A solar PV plant can be built in the city, but they tend to be built either in the outskirts or in the suburbs or in the countryside. For example, in Germany, the biggest early uptakers of solar power were farmers. And so that is maybe an interesting point for your country here, and which is worth mentioning. I think in terms of some of the challenges, I mentioned, of course, there's this area that we need to modernize and expand the grid because of the wind coming in the north of the country and the solar in the south of the country. So that's a very important issue which is being addressed at the moment. Then there is the issue of the flexibility of renewable power. People often say it's not a flexible resource and it needs to be supplemented with other forms of power. This is not necessarily so. And again, I don't want to make any conclusions about Kosovo because I don't know the situation here. But there are technical possibilities which are being tested in Germany, and what my colleague from the UK was saying, for example, batteries. There are other forms of making the system more flexible, which is using electricity to turn water into hydrogen and methane. So power to gas or power to heat is using electricity to heat water for the heating systems. There's own consumption whereby generators of renewable power can consume that power themselves on site. So again, not too much of it has to go into the grid. There's lots of things one can do, and batteries, of course, will be a major solution. They're still too expensive at the moment, but that was an issue of the next 5 years, I think.
What would you say to local skeptics who from here our authorities would say, yes, but the German government subsidized all those jobs and it was done because you're a wealthy country? What would you say to counteract that argument?
It is a wealthy country, of course, and the renewable energy subsidies were not subsidies from the government, but it was the same as what the colleague from England was explaining. It's a surcharge on the electricity bill. And of course, depending on what people earn, you can't always, you have to be careful. So I would say you could start a program maybe more slowly. You can't have the ideal world tomorrow, but you can do it in small steps. What some of the colleagues were saying is the municipalities have an important role to play. You have lots of municipal buildings, so why not use the KfW financing opportunities, or maybe the World Bank, or some other donor funding, or there was talk about this environmental fund being set up, starting on those kind of projects, which are easy, relatively easy wins. So you start with a few success stories: energy efficiency in buildings, solar on roofs, schools, kindergarten, like the examples from Slovenia, and you get the kind of learning building up, you get enthusiasm generated by new projects. This is something we saw in Germany, you know, when the neighbor has a solar plant on his roof, everybody was asking, oh, this sounds interesting, maybe we should do that as well. And so you get this kind of knock-on effect which happens.
And finally, the Balkan Green Foundation is organizing this first regional conference. It's just set up. Do you think it's paradoxical to have a Balkan Green Foundation set up in the most coal-oriented and dirty town in not only Eastern Europe, but in the entire Europe?
It might seem like a paradox, but it's probably a very good idea for that very reason. A simple answer.
Thanks very much.
Okay, good. Thank you.